Story number 1. My summer job is giving tours of the woods and trails just outside my hometown of Older Hills, New Jersey. So far, it's been a good gig, especially right before starting college. The pay is decent, and the customers are usually appreciative. Many even tip me, and I'm allowed to keep whatever I earn. Best of all, I love being outdoors. I'm a small girl, pretty, I've been told, and people are often surprised that I'm willing to go out into the woods alone, even in broad daylight, with complete strangers. Maybe it's just the carelessness of youth. My routine is pretty simple. I stand in the main parking lot of the Older Hills Woods Reservation wearing khakis, hiking boots, and a maroon Older Hills Parks Department polo shirt. I carry a clipboard, though that's mostly for show. All the forms, maps, and emergency info I might actually need are stored on my phone. My boss insists on the clipboard because he says studies show it makes you look official. And he's probably right. He's a smart cookie. Whenever I think of Older Hills, I'm reminded of that E. Cummings poem, Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town. That's Older Hills in a nutshell. A pretty how town. Full of old money, old mansions, and wide emerald green lawns that seem to glow in the summer sunlight. And just outside town, the woods are thick with history, romance, and mystery. I love spending time out there, guiding people through the winding trails beneath the tall trees. But last week, things felt different. A group of 3 guys pulled into the lot in a ridiculously huge, jet-black Ford F-250 with Texas plates. The tires squealed as it jerked to a stop, taking up 1.5 parking spaces like they owned the place. My first instinct was to go over and tell them to move the truck. But the moment they climbed out, I thought better of it. All 3 were big. Not just tall, but broad, and there was something about them, a kind of presence that made my stomach tighten. They gave off a vibe. They wore shorts and t-shirts. 2 of them had Texas A&M logos across their chests, so I figured that's where they went to school. The third guy's shirt featured an eagle clutching an American flag in its talons. All 3 wore worn trucker hats. As soon as they got out, one of them belched loudly. The other 2 followed like it was some kind of contest. When their truck doors swung open, I caught a glimpse of at least half a dozen crushed beer cans rolling on the floor. An expensive truck. An expensive college. But they were trying hard, too hard, to come off like down-home country boys. And the Axe body spray? I could smell it from 10 feet away. Frat boys, I thought. This will be good practice for dealing with frat parties in college. I tried to smile, tried to look on the bright side. But honestly, I was already getting the jitters. Something about them was off. The biggest guy, especially. He hadn't said a word yet, but I could already tell he was their ringleader. He had eyes that were a little too wild, and a little too cruel. "Sup, baby," said the shortest and roundest of the 3, flashing me a wink. A million memes danced through my head. I stifled a smirk. Instead, I turned my smile toward the tall one, just to piss the short guy off. "Hey there," I said brightly. "Would you like a tour of the woods? It's only $10, and the trails are absolutely gorgeous right now." The tall guy smirked. "So you're a skin, if we'd pay $10, just to wander around in the woods with a pretty little lady?" He let that hang in the air for a beat, then grinned. "Well yeah, we are." He chuckled and gave me a playful wink. "I'm just messin' with you. What I meant to say is, we'd love a tour of these woods. And $10? That's a damn bargain." The guy in the flag shirt, the one in the middle, spit tobacco juice onto the ground like it was a reflex. Super charming. He wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. "Hell, I can't even get a can of Skol on the East Coast for $10. $10 for a little natural beauty," he added, looking me up and down. "Can't go wrong there." He said East Coast like it left a bad taste in his mouth. I chose to ignore that and move things along. Okay, well, we can get started right away. My name's Cordy, by the way. The tall one did the talking for all three of them. I figured he probably always did. I'm Tex, he said. This little turd blossom here, he pointed to the short, heavy one, is Jimbo. And the fella who won't quit spittin' is Hose. Texas Hose. And Jimbo. Of course. Tex, Hose, and Jimbo swaggered back to the truck and hauled out 3 backpacks. I wasn't surprised. And as they moved, I spotted a Sigma Chi fraternity decal slapped across the back window. Figures. I'd already heard plenty of stories from friends who had gone off to college, enough to know what that sticker meant. Do we pay you now or when we get back? Tex asked casually. He pulled out a thick wad of 20s and 50s from his jeans pocket like it was nothing. Hey now, Tex, Jimbo chuckled, elbowing him. Don't go flashin' that roll around. Somebody might try to rob you. Tex laughed. I'll give this roll up over their dead body. All three of them laughed like that was the funniest thing in the world. We can take care of that when we get back, I said, trying to keep my voice light. If you're not satisfied, I don't like to charge. We're pretty friendly and unofficial here. We aim to please. I'm sure we're gonna be satisfied, said Hose, grinning. I mean, you seem like you're real good people. I forced a polite smile. Inside, though, the jitters had turned into full-blown heebie-jeebies. My instincts were screaming at me. But I also had a job to do, and something to prove. I wasn't about to back down. Not even a little. I guess that's why I decided to press on, despite the rising trepidation bubbling in my chest. Well, I said, trying to keep my tone light, follow me. As we stepped into the tree line, I glanced over my shoulder and asked, hey, you guys are Sigma Chi's, right? I hear you throw some kick-ass parties. Yeah, said Hose, trailing behind me as we entered the woods. You haven't lived until you've survived Derby Days weekend. Yep. Yep, Tex added with a nod. It's legendary. Cool, I replied. Cool. I was starting at UMass next semester, and I was pretty sure there was a Sigma Chi chapter on campus. Yeah, said Jimbo. Massholes party pretty hard. But for East Coast. The three of them laughed and high-fived. We weren't even 10 minutes into the hike, maybe 500 steps in, and it already felt like the longest tour of the summer. I'd decided to take them up Storm King Hill, a route that was challenging, but also incredibly beautiful. The trail winds through lush pockets of flora, twists past moss-covered rocks, and opens up to breathtaking views if you know where to look. It also offers a decent chance of spotting a red fox, or maybe even a deer if you're quiet enough. Bears were technically a rare risk in these woods. But I always liked the old joke, if things go bad, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun the 3 Texans. Probably just Jimbo, my inner voice quipped. Then another voice, quieter, colder, asked, what if you have to outrun all 3 Texans? The day was warm and overcast, with a low ceiling of gray clouds threatening rain. The trails were mostly empty. The Storm King Trail in particular, our toughest but most scenic hike, was completely deserted, except for us. Tex, Hose, and Jimbo had started to lag behind. Not far, maybe 15 or 20 feet, but they were whispering to each other, heads tilted close together, sharing jokes or secrets or something. It was starting to make me uneasy. Hey guys, I called over my shoulder. Would you mind keeping up? It'd make me feel a little better if we all stayed together. They scurried to close the gap, chuckling like they hadn't meant anything by it. We kept walking, carefully navigating the muddy trail as birds rustled in the trees overhead. Then Jimbo piped up behind me. I bet a pretty lady like you could get into all kinds of trouble out here in the great outdoors, huh? I didn't flinch, but I felt it. The way he said it, casual, joking, but with a sharp edge underneath. I smirked, keeping my voice cool. I'll bet Texans can find plenty of trouble anywhere, huh, Jimbo? That cracked them up. Hose and Tex hooted and hollered, and Jimbo joined in, laughing like I'd said the funniest thing in the world. But I didn't laugh. Not even a little. We were a few miles into the hike, steadily making our way uphill, when Jimbo suddenly stopped. He dropped his backpack to the ground, unzipped it, and pulled out a couple of clinking glass bottles, 40s of Budweiser. Without a word, he started handing them out. "You know, you guys really aren't supposed to be drinking out here," I said, trying to keep my tone light but firm. Jimbo looked up at me and smirked, his voice suddenly holding an edge. "And just what are you gonna do about it?" I felt the mood shift, almost imperceptibly, from, shucks, frat boy antics to something darker. Something less innocent. Less funny. I knew I wasn't in a position to push it right now. So I just shrugged. "If anything serious happened," I said calmly, "I'd just call park security." Tex took a long swig of his beer and looked at me sideways. "And are y'all gonna call security just because some good OL boys want to wet their whistles?" I forced a laugh. "Nah. I don't drink beer, or I'd have one myself. You don't have any wine coolers in that bag, do you, Jimbo?" He grinned a big, beefy grin, cheeks flushed already. "Sorry, fresh out." "Oh well," I sighed. "You think y'all can keep up while drinking those beers?" I added. Hose puffed his chest a little. "I was an all-state running back in high school. Drunk damn near every game. The only thing you were all-state in was pulling your pud," Tex said with a laugh. Hose looked huffy and muttered something I couldn't quite make out. We kept going. Another mile or so passed underfoot. The air was thick with humidity and something else I couldn't quite name. We were getting close to a part of the woods I loved most. There's a hidden clearing deep in those trees, a tucked-away spot with a perfectly still pond surrounded by wildflowers and low-croaking frogs. If you're lucky, turtles sun themselves along the rocks. It's hard to find. You have to do a little bushwhacking. Some rock climbing too. But as far as I know, I'm the only one who ever really found it. And I know, it probably sounds reckless. Maybe even stupid. Leading 3 half-drunk, rowdy frat boys deep into the woods where no one else could hear me scream. But still, there was something about that place. Something magical. I felt like once they saw it, we'd be fine. I'd be safe. Still, I was jittery when I asked, "You boys want to do a little bushwhacking now? See something really cool?" They hooted and hollered like I just offered them fireworks and free whiskey. "Sure thing," Jimbo said, predictably enough. "I'm always down for a little bushwhacking." I rolled my eyes and sighed. Then I picked up a thick stick and started clearing heavy, drooping tree limbs out of our way. "Be careful," I added. "Some of these plants have thorns. They hurt like hell." The brush thickened quickly, vines tangling at our feet, mosquitoes humming in the air. After a few minutes of beating through the undergrowth, we reached a craggy little embankment we'd have to scramble up. I went first. About halfway up, I heard Hose yell from behind me. "Son of a..." I cut my hand. "Does it hurt?" Jimbo called out, clearly not concerned. "Hurts like 8 on a bitch boat, you bitch," Hose snapped, voice sharp with pain. "Boys, watch your language," I giggled, trying to sound playful. "Or I won't show you my favorite spot in the woods." They exchanged glances again, sly and mean this time. Not boyish or flirty. Calculated. A fresh wave of nerves swept through me. Then, without a word, I saw Jimbo unzip his backpack again. This time, he pulled out a roll of duct tape. My blood ran cold. What are you going to do with that? I shouted, stepping back instinctively. Tex grinned, an ugly, feral grin. Well, Cordy, he drawled, we already wet our whistles. Now we're gonna wet our dicks. And out here? Pretty sure nobody can hear you scream. You let us out here, Jimbo added casually, like he was stating a fact. Don't even try to tell us you didn't want this, bitch. Hose still hadn't said a word. He just stared at me, eyes wide and hungry. Like a predator. Which, I guess, is exactly what he was. That's when I ran. I spun around and bolted toward the clearing. The one place I thought might save me. Tex laughed behind me. Oh, you better do it over there if it's your favorite spot. I'm fine with that. Let's make this romantic, boys. They came after me, crashing through the brush like wild animals. My boots slipped in the mud, and for a second, I felt fingers, Tex's, I think, snag one of my belt loops and yank hard. I stumbled but tore free. I didn't stop. Hose was close now. I could feel his breath on my neck. Hot and sour. Forget jitters, this was full-blown terror. My adrenal system screamed. My lungs burned. My throat tasted like battery acid and bile. Another set of hands grazed my side, Jimbo, maybe, but I didn't turn to check. I just ran harder. The trees opened around me like curtains, revealing the clearing. My clearing. And I wasn't alone. Hose must have been the first to see him, my boss. He stopped short, his eyes going huge like something out of a cartoon. He tried to turn and flee, but the wet grass betrayed him. He fell hard, smacking the mud with a loud, pitiful grunt. Tex and Jimbo burst into the clearing right after, laughing, until they, too, looked up. Too late. I do wonder sometimes what they thought in that final moment. When they saw him. My boss. 7 feet tall. The torso of a man, bare and muscled like a statue. Thick, sinewy goat legs with hooves as black as oil. His head, massive, crowned with antlers. A stag's head, but his eyes were human. Intelligent. Merciless. He carried an axe. Always does. He's theatrical like that, likes to make an entrance. His assistants were there, too. Devotees. Smaller than him, but built the same. Stag-headed. Muscular. Less majestic, maybe, but just as lethal. They preferred daggers. The fight was over in seconds. Hose screamed first, and then Texas Jimbo tried to run. None of them made it far. The clearing was painted red by the time the echoes of their cries died down. Then, silence. A frog hopped lazily into the pond and made a soft plop. The breeze stirred the reeds. One of the assistants knelt beside what remained of Hose and casually tore off his arm. Began munching. The pond sparkled like glass. Perfect. Peaceful. The very image of pastoral bliss. My boss turned and gave me a nod. Approval. He's a smart one. Always has been. He knew no one would question a college girl in a polo shirt with a clipboard leading people into the woods. Of course I looked official. And that's all most people ever need to trust you. Never mind that Older Hills is such a rich place, too full of old money to bother doing anything so common as offering guided tours through the goddamn woods. The only thing the Parks and Rec department really cares about is their annual cocktail gala under the big white tent in the Rose Garden. No one's ever asked why I wear a polo shirt with no official logo. Or why my clipboard's just a piece of cardboard with nothing written on it. They just see a confident girl leading the way, and they follow. No matter how many times I guide sacrificial lambs into this enchanted, hollowed space. I still get jittery. Every single time. It's a thrill, you know? Serving a powerful, virile, laughing god. The compensation is great, sure. But that's not really why I do it. I do it for the awe. My boss always tells me I'm the best guide he's ever had. Oh, not just my boss. My God. An hour later, it was all over but the feasting. You served me well, as always, he beamed at me, his huge jaws working slowly as he chewed a chunk of Tex's brain. The clearing was strewn with blood and viscera. Someone's liver was hanging from a yew tree like a wet red streamer, already drawing the attention of a pair of crows. They pecked at it delicately, like they were sampling hors d'oeuvres. Down by the water, a camo hat and a blood-slick MAGA cap swayed from the branches of a low oak. They were dotted with bits of scalp and tangled hair. A pair of hiking boots, still with a foot inside, rested near the shoreline, one sock sagging, blood oozing down into the moss. Another crow had managed to pull something thick and shiny out of the boot and took off into the sky with its prize. One of the stag-headed devotees had peeled the skin from Jimbo's face and eaten it like string cheese. Now he was cradling Jimbo's heavy skull, pretending to make it talk. "Well hell, little lady," the stag-head said in a perfect Texas drawl, working the jaw like a puppet. I couldn't help but giggle. I reached into Tex's pocket and pulled out a fat roll of 20s, still sticky with blood. I wiped them off and tucked them into my backpack. "The tips," I said with a smile. Always my favorite part of the job. Older Hills really is such an opulent, pretty hell town. But just a few miles outside of it, out here, deep in the forest, something ancient rules. A savage, primal ritual is the law of the land. Sometimes I think about how much of a contradiction that is. But I also believe this: the founding families of Older Hills, they know. Maybe not the details, but deep down in their bones, they understand. They know something lives out here. And as long as it stays well-fed and happy, so does the town. My God is older than Older Hills. Older than the hills themselves. He is strong. Ancient. Hungry. And that's why no one ever questions why so many people go out into the woods with a high school girl pretending to be their guide. And are never seen again. Pretty towns know how to keep their secrets. Story number 2. I've been with the park rangers in Alaska for about 30 years. I'm getting ready to retire in just a few months. Alaska is an amazingly beautiful state. In many ways, it's very different from the rest of the United States. There is a lot more wilderness here, things that are still quite wild. Nature is much more prevalent, and the lifestyle is a lot more rural. If you've ever wanted to live somewhere without many neighbors, Alaska has plenty of places just for you. Anyway, my story begins back in 1996. We got a call about a missing person. Now, missing person cases aren't unusual out here in the wilds of Alaska. We get the occasional report like that. But this one felt different. The missing person wasn't an Alaskan resident. She was a woman who had come to visit some family. She was supposed to leave about a week ago, but the family hadn't heard from her. I reassured the woman who called that there was a good chance the missing woman had already returned but just hadn't checked in. Since she was young, I figured maybe she was just enjoying some freedom. That wasn't uncommon. Still, I told the caller we would take things seriously. We'd look into the situation and let her know what we found. The first thing I did was visit the family the woman was supposed to be staying with. To be honest, I believed the missing woman had probably already left Alaska and gone back home to New York, where she lived. But I thought it was important to check anyway. After all, if it were my kid, I'd want to know exactly where they were. It took some time to get where I was headed. Travel isn't always the most convenient out here in Alaska. When I finally arrived, I knocked on the door of the girl's aunt and explained the situation. I asked some simple questions, but that's when I started to feel more worried than I had initially. The aunt was very welcoming and gracious, which I appreciated, but she quickly told me she hadn't seen her niece since the girl left a week ago to go back home. I stayed for a cup of coffee and thanked the woman for her time. Before leaving, I reassured her I would check in with the pilot who flew the girl out and get back to her with any news. Not long after, I made my way to find the pilot. Though I was a bit more concerned now, I still expected the pilot would confirm they had flown her out safely to the nearest airport outside of Alaska. That theory, however, quickly fell apart. When I arrived at the pilot's residence, I found something deeply disturbing. The front door was covered in red. And I don't mean painted red. It was the color of blood, a spray of it. I pounded on the door, announcing myself several times, but no one answered. I peeked around the house and saw more blood stains. I started following the trail, and at some points, I noticed claw marks gouged deep into the side of the cabin. Eventually, I came upon a broken window at the back of the building. I grabbed my flashlight and looked inside. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, the walls, even the furniture. I immediately called the nearest authorities and explained what I'd found. That's when the real investigation began. Inside the cabin, there was a horrid, nauseating smell. The authorities discovered bits and pieces of the pilot scattered throughout the place. A head here, an arm there, blood and entrails smeared across almost every surface. It was sickening, to say the least. It was possible the missing woman had been in the area, but it had been too long to know for sure. I decided to check the airstrip the pilot would have flown out from, hoping to find some clues. But I found almost nothing to indicate what had happened or if the girl had even been there. My initial thought was that she had to have been somewhere nearby. Still, there wasn't much to go on. The trail was almost non-existent. With no solid leads, I headed back to my station. I informed the family members of everything we'd found so far. Mostly, I told them we would continue the search and that, sadly, it did appear she was truly missing. I obviously didn't tell the family the details about the pilot or anything they didn't need to know. A day turned into a week, then a month, and we still hadn't found anything. There was no clue about what had happened to the girl, or why the pilot had been mauled, if that's even what it was, or by what creature. Most of the law enforcement assumed it was a wild animal attack. But I didn't buy it. I'd never seen a wild animal break into someone's home and completely eviscerate them. Sure, sometimes animals get aggressive, but the level of carnage here didn't make sense. Also, it didn't seem like whatever attacked the pilot had eaten any of him. The body was torn to pieces, yes, but if it were an animal, you'd expect it to feast on some of it, if not all. The claw marks were deep, but none matched any animal known to live here in Alaska. The eeriest part was that whatever attacked the pilot seemed to act with intelligence, almost cold calculation. There are smart animals, sure. But the pilot managed to get his gun out and fired several shots during the attack. Whatever attacked him avoided the bullets. You'd have to be incredibly fast to do something like that, evading shotgun fire at close range and still get close enough to rip someone apart. I didn't know of any human or animal capable of that. Not a single part of this situation sat right with me. But there wasn't much I could do. I had almost no leads to follow. Looking back now, I wish this had been the end of it. No disrespect to the family, the girl, or the pilot, but what happened next was more than I could have ever bargained for, if you catch my drift. I was home one night, a couple of months after the investigation. The fire was crackling in my chair, the doors locked tight. Outside, a snowstorm was raging. I thought I heard a faint call for help. At first, I assumed the wind was playing tricks on me because of the heavy snowfall. That thought vanished when a loud pounding hit my door. I jumped, nearly spilling my hot cocoa all over myself. I shouted a few obscenities, grabbed my gun, and called out, "Who's there?" No answer. I peered through the peephole, and what I saw shocked me, a blonde girl in her 20s, covered in blood, crying outside my door. I quickly unlocked the door and swung it open, ready to help. But no one was there. I was thrown off. I shut the door, locked it again, and took 2 steps away, then the pounding started again. I looked back through the peephole. As I did, the power went out for a moment. I felt shaky and couldn't see clearly. For a brief second, I swore I heard faint sniffles and crying. Then the power came back on. This was normal given the blizzard outside. But what happened next was not normal. I heard persistent knocking, like something blowing in the wind, at my door. It was different from the earlier pounding. Looking through the peephole again, I saw a rope tied to something. Inside the rope was a bloody trash bag. I freaked out and called the police. While waiting for them, I could hear the bag hitting the door with every gust of wind. When law enforcement arrived, they found the remains of a woman inside the bag. It matched the description of the missing woman we had been investigating. This poor girl had been torn to pieces. It looked like someone, or something, had ripped her spine out of her body and then had a grand old time tearing the rest apart, piece by piece. This wasn't natural. It wasn't normal. I was shaken, to say the least. Something was out there. And it left this girl on my doorstep, which meant it knew where I lived, and that I had been looking into the disappearances. The next few nights were sleepless. Part of it was the guilt I felt over the way the girl was found. But part of it was pure horror, knowing that the same thing might come back. The little sleep I did get came with nightmares and disturbing chanting echoing inside my mind. I'd wake up hearing those sounds for several minutes. In time, the nightmares slowly stopped. It wasn't until a year later that things got really strange again. By then, I had somewhat moved on from the previous year's horrors, as much as anyone could after something like that. Then, I got a call at the station. There was crying on the line, and someone trying to speak, but the connection kept breaking up. After several attempts to calm the caller down, the line went dead. I decided to check the phone stations around the park to see if I could find any clues. When I reached one of our most remote stations, I knew something was wrong. There was a blood-soaked handprint smeared across the equipment. The phone line had been ripped out, and there was a trail of blood leading deeper into the woods. I called law enforcement and gave them my location. Then, gun in hand, I slowly followed the blood-soaked trail through the snow. It wasn't long before I found myself face to face with a fresh body, well, half of one. A man was pinned to a tree by a branch driven straight through his mouth. His upper half was there, but where his lower half should have been, there was only blood and some of his steaming insides melting into the snow. I stopped right there and waited for the authorities to arrive. At that moment, I wasn't even slightly comfortable. Honestly, I wanted nothing to do with continuing this investigation. But I didn't have a choice, this happened in my park. And I was starting to think it was done intentionally. Afraid for my life, I didn't dare move an inch until the police showed up. I told them everything I had found and what little I knew. Eventually, they found the rest of the man's body a mile away. Afterward, I went home and tried to sleep, but didn't get much rest at all. I called in and took some time off. That was easy to do since I was the lead ranger at the station. During my time off, strange things started happening. I began receiving weird phone calls at night. The first call was the voice of the man who had called me right before his death. I still get chills thinking about it, it sounded exactly like him. It was like his dying moment was being replayed. But this wasn't an audio recording. There was no way it could have been. It had to be the ghost of that man, or something mimicking his last moments perfectly. The second night, I got a call filled only with snickering on the other end. I threatened to call law enforcement and told whoever it was exactly what they could do with themselves, if you catch my drift. Night 3 brought several calls between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m., all on the hour. One was a woman crying. The 3 a.m. call was a child repeatedly asking for his mother. And the final call of the night was the man who had been mauled at our park, calling again. I called the authorities about the calls, but they couldn't do much. The fourth night, the call was an almost demonic or extremely warped voice I couldn't understand. Night 5, someone whispered, "I see you," and then hung up. That call unnerved me the most. Right after, I heard strange wailing outside my window. I peeked through the curtains but saw nothing. Still, I was uncomfortable for the rest of the night. I even started recording the calls to share with law enforcement. Again, there wasn't much they could do. Night 6 call was an older woman begging for help and screaming, like she was being slowly murdered. Night 7 was just heavy breathing. As terrified as I was, I wanted to get back to a somewhat normal routine. So, I went back to work the next morning. By then, I was convinced something was stalking me. I figured it was best to use that knowledge and set traps, hoping to catch whatever it was. At the end of my shift, I clocked out and locked up the station. Then, I waited. I wasn't going home. If something was stalking me, I wanted to meet it here at work. I loaded my shotgun and my magnum and prepared myself. Around 11 p.m. I heard loud pounding at the station door. I asked who was there. Then, I heard laughter behind me. I turned and saw blood smeared on the window. The shape looked like a three-fingered handprint. Suddenly, a loud thud hit the roof above me. I sat down cautiously and waited. I wasn't going to be baited out. But I didn't have to wait long. A loud smack hit the station window. It was a bloody trash bag thrown against the glass. Then another one slammed the window. Then another. And another. And another. And on the other side of the bloody handprint, I saw something I'll never forget. Then a final smack cracked the window. The glass shattered inward, cutting my skin with flying shards. At the same time, I heard the loudest, most disturbing scream I've ever heard in my life. There are no words to describe that sound. I grabbed my phone, keeping a close eye on the windows. Behind me, I heard slow scratching on the outside of the station. But whatever it was had killed the phone lines. The slow clawing circled the station and then hit the window again. I couldn't see what it was in the darkness, but I watched the marks it made on the glass. I raised my shotgun, and the moment I did, everything stopped. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of snow and the wind blowing it around. Then, I heard a crashing sound behind me. I spun and fired shots, but saw nothing. Just as I was reloading, the glass behind me burst. Pieces flew inward and cut my skin. I fell to the ground but quickly got back up and fired a few more shots into the darkness. I heard nothing in response. My adrenaline had me shaking, not from the cold, but from pure, unrelenting fear. Then, out of the shadows, I heard a woman's laughter. Followed by a man's crying. These sounds circled me, echoing eerily in the night. I kept my eyes peeled, but whatever was there stayed hidden in the shadows. Now, I was even more afraid. I didn't know where this thing was. Were the voices, the crying, real? Or were they just inside my own mind? One thing was clear, whatever this thing was, it was creating all of it. Then, that same inhuman scream erupted behind me. I spun around and fired every round I had left in my shotgun. Immediately, I pulled out my magnum. A burst of disturbingly terrifying laughter followed, like nothing I had ever heard in my entire life. Then silence. Before a loud scream rang out ahead of me. I fired a few more shots and ran out through the broken window toward the screams. At that point, I didn't care if I died. I just wanted it all to be over. I was sick of the sleepless nights and being toyed with by this thing. I fired as I ran until I heard the clicking sound of my gun running empty. I reloaded as fast as my fingers would allow, then shakily spun around in the snow, certain I was about to die any moment. There I stood, shaking and crying, until the sun finally rose. One of my coworkers arrived early for their shift and was shocked by the scene. They came to me, consoled me, then drove out to find a working phone. They called the police, and I remember being a complete wreck. My mom was broken, and I was terrified for my life. The worst part was I never saw the thing. I gave the authorities all the information I had, then took what little savings I had and moved away immediately. My coworkers helped me find a transfer. Now, I live in California, preparing to retire completely. I never found out what was going on, what that thing was, or anything else related to it. I left as soon as I could, and I haven't been bothered by it since. I imagine it's native to Alaska. I have no clue what that thing was, or how anyone is supposed to kill it. But I'm positive it's still out there somewhere, still killing.